Hi everybody, Joe here from SHUTTERSPEAK Photography. Very nice to see your smiling faces again here on YouTube. So today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about exposure delay mode, why you'd want to use it, why this is an important thing to add into your list of tricks, as it were. It's a great way of really assuring the sharpest photos you can possibly get when you're operating with a tripod. Who's going to want to use this? Anyone using a tripod to get great astrophotography, long exposures, macro photography. This is a great tool to utilize. It plays a role in the mirrorless cameras, and it plays an even greater role in mirrored cameras. So before we get started though, I'd like to just say thanks for being here with me. Thanks for watching. If anything in this video turns out to be helpful to you, please help me out by hitting like, hitting subscribe, and by all means leave me a comment. If you're familiar with this channel, you'll know that I do tend to and try my best to answer most comments. So drop a line and say hi. I'll probably say hi back. So thanks for that in advance. So what is exposure delay mode? Well, it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like, right? It delays your exposure. So what happens is when you turn on exposure delay mode, let's say we set it for 1 second, okay? You're on a tripod, vibration reduction should be set to off because vibration reduction generally isn't supposed to be used on a tripod. It's meant for handheld. So for maximum sharpness, we're going for maximum sharpness, right? We turn on exposure delay mode. We set it to 1 second. We hit the shutter release button. The camera automatically at that point sets exposure in focus. Okay, and then it waits a full 1 second before it takes the picture. Now, what has this done for us? Well, in the mirrorless camera, it's eliminated any possible shake from when we push that button of the shutter release. Okay, now in the mirrored camera, it plays a slightly bigger role. Okay, when you hit the shutter release button, it flips up the mirror, focuses, sets exposure, waits 1 second, and then takes the picture. Because when the mirror flips up, there can be the slightest bit of shake within your camera. Okay, so exposure delay mode is eliminating any of that shake by waiting that full second. So now you're probably saying to yourself, well, how about the self timer? Why don't I just use the self timer? Well, let me explain to you the difference in the self timer. So the self timer you can set, and let's say you set it to 3 seconds or whatever it might be, 5 seconds. And to me, that's intolerably long. I want to set my camera to take pictures a little quicker than that. So when I use exposure delay mode, I'm usually setting it to about a ½ second. That's about as much as I can really tolerate. But I'm not going to wait 5 seconds every time I take a picture. That's just not reasonable. But there's also a more important difference. So what happens when I set my self timer to take a picture, essentially what happens is when it reaches the end of that countdown, it takes a picture the same as if I had pressed that shutter release button. So everything happens all at once the way it does when I take a regular picture. So there's focus, there's exposure. If you're having a mirrored camera, there's the flipping of the mirror. All of that happens at the time of the shot. Okay, so any shake that could have been introduced from those things will still occur. It's the same as pushing the button. Okay, again, exposure delay mode does things differently. It does all of that first, takes the picture after the delay. So that's eliminating any possible shake within your camera. So that's what's great about exposure delay mode, and that's what's going to get you that sharpest possible picture. Now, this is something that I keep in the My menu, so I always have a shortcut to it on my mirrorless cameras. I do have another video where I go through some of the settings in the My menu, and I believe I have touched upon putting this in there, although I really didn't go into detail as to how it works, why it's different than the self timer, and why you might want to be using it. So it's a great thing to have. It's a great tool. And for me, the way I use this is I generally don't carry around a remote shutter release with me. And I do enjoy astrophotography. I do enjoy shooting on tripod. And I just really, just don't like having to go through that extra step of getting a remote set up and getting it working, and then you hit the button and it's not working because something's not set up right. It's just, to me, it's always been a little bit of a hassle. I've broken a bunch of them, so when I hooked them all up, they didn't work. So me and remotes, we have a bad history. Okay, so for me, exposure delay mode is the perfect solution. I can just set it to a half second, hit that button, walk away from the camera, half second later, it takes the picture with absolutely no shake, and I'm getting the sharpest possible shot that I can get out of my camera. Okay, so it's a great replacement for a remote. If you don't have one, don't want one, or you just forgot to bring it, that's a great option. It's also a setting that's going to operate if you're doing, say, time-lapse photography or interval shooting. You can add in an exposure delay, and it'll happen between every shot. Okay, so if you're using your interval, again, this will introduce a delay in between every shot for that sharpest possible shot. Now, that's maybe not so big on the mirrorless cameras at that point, having that delay in the interval, because the mirror is not flipping. We don't have a mirror in the mirrorless camera, hence mirrorless, right? So for the mirrored camera, that's something that you may want to consider, especially if you're doing interval or time lapse. But you know, again, you're also preventing any shake from focus or exposure. Now, you know, in terms of doing a time lapse or interval, you probably are going to set your focus point and not let the camera change focus, because if the camera, when you're doing, say, a time lapse, you don't want the camera to change focus points between shot to shot to shot, because you know, you may have something that's in focus in one shot, out of focus in the next shot. It doesn't make sense, right? So generally when we're doing time lapse and interval, the focus is a set point, but exposure is going to change slightly. So you know, I'm not really thinking that there's going to be much of a chance of shake with exposure changing in the mirrorless camera, but in the mirrored camera, that mirror is flipping, and you're definitely going to have the possibility of the smallest amount of shake. And if you're looking to get the sharpest possible shots you can, then the exposure delay mode is something that you're going to want to look into. All right, so there you have it. That's the difference between the self-timer and the shutter delay mode. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, leave me a comment and let me know. I'd appreciate it. And take the time out to hit that subscribe button. And once again, nice to see you all. And I'll see you again very soon. Thanks, YouTube. Bye-bye.